Hello and welcome to City Beat, your central source of news and information for the city of Rocky Mount. I'm Tamika Keenan-Norman and very excited to be with you today because we've been talking about development for some time along Raleigh Boulevard. And coming up, we've got a new Roses Supercenter at the corner of Raleigh Boulevard and Fairview Road in the Edgemont Shopping Center. And here to speak with us today about that is Alan Matthews, who's the Director of Economic Development.
Good morning.
For the Chamber in partnership with the city, right?
Correct.
Good morning. How are you, Alan?
I'm doing fine. I think back to the last time we were together, it was in front of the Hobby Lobby, which ironically, that was 54,000 square feet. That was recently filled, and now we're talking about another 54,000 square feet, as you correctly stated, where the Roses Supercenter is going. So I'm pleased to be here to talk about things that are happening all over our city.
And we are certainly glad to have you. First, let's start off before we get into the Roses Supercenter itself, how the project started, why this location, etc.
The best way to maybe tell the story in a short amount of time is to explain that obviously that intersection, the corner of Fairview Road and Raleigh Street, is an important commercial area for our city, identified by the city as that, as well as me. And it was a city retreat actually that prompted, why don't we take advantage of the current synergy that is already at that intersection. For an example, at that time Eckerd's had vacated the Edgecombe Shopping Center and had gone freestanding across the corner. You had the Finner old warehouse that was torn down behind the Hardee's, which happens to be one of the highest volume Hardee's in Rocky Mount. And I think there's 7 Hardee's here, so it was one of the highest volumes. So the Finner warehouse was destroyed and torn down, and the Advanced Auto went in. Then you had, most recently down the street, the credit union, State Employees Credit Union, that tore down the old Gay Yost Funeral Home. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of spend that was taking place, a lot of capital investment in that area. So it seemed appropriate to eradicate what may be considered an eyesore, as that shopping center, the Edgecombe Shopping Center, had not had an anchor tenant in more than a decade. Going way back in time, and I used to live in that area, it was Food World grocery store, headquartered out of Greensboro, was there, and then Food Line came in. And then later on, Food Line vacated and went down to the Oakwood Shopping Center, which by the way, the Oakwood Shopping Center has the highest occupancy rate consistently, and I've been measuring this for a decade, of any shopping center in our city. So that tells me that we're not overbuilt in that area and maybe a little bit underserved, and there's a need for something to occur. So you've got this area that's defined as a gray field, which is properties that's kind of commercially deceased. And you got the city saying, let's put a focus on this. So with business recruitment, I went about the business of trying to assemble, identify ownership. And the building was condoed, meaning at one time there was 4 separate owners. And it's awfully difficult to get 4 people to decide something as simple as where we're going to go for dinner, as opposed to all agree. So there'd been some work done over the last 2 or 3 years with several different projects, some of which did not get off the ground. And then identifying, and really what we're talking about is deal making, but identifying what would work within this center, who would want to locate within this center, and albeit we were still in an economic downturn during the beginning of this project, which I'm going to date back about a year ago. So Roses was growing, building stores during the economic downturn, as well as several other businesses. So I went out and found a developer that liked to do what they call second use space, you know, when something is a little older. And this developer came to Rocky Mount, was introduced to the project, was introduced to Roses. The name is Walt Creighton of Creighton & Associates out of New Bern. So that is one of the major pieces of getting a developer that wants to do a build to suit or to lease out. And we were able to and fortunate to get Walt to come into the community and do this project. So he partnered with Roses, and they had an agreement on 54,000 square feet. One of the unique things that needs to be said about what Roses is doing here is they had just recently opened their first store that has a grocery component to it. So typically Roses is general merchandise and apparel. So in Elizabeth City, about 6 months ago, they opened their very first store that has groceries, again, as a component. So this store will be their second one that has groceries. So that'll bring some more services to the area.
Now, is that second in the state or just?
Second in Rose's corporate.
Okay.
In all their operations. Okay. So we're very pleased that it's bringing that piece to our area, and very excited about the developer who has a lot of connections with other retailers. As a matter of fact, there's already interest in the piece that's to the next of where Rose's is going, excuse me, to the right of where Rose's is going. And he's got 3 national tenants that he's talking to. Mm-hmm. So it's not going to be just Rose's, it's hopefully going to be Rose's and 2 to 3 more retailers. And potentially what we're going to end up having is this whole center come back to life again with new asphalt, with new lightings and lighting fixtures in the parking lot, and with new services. And by the way, let's not forget about the potential jobs when all 3 retailers are there. So we could be looking at somewhere around 75 to 100 jobs in that area. So it's a very exciting thing that's happening, and I'm very pleased that it was able to occur. I think it's appropriate at this time to say that the city was very much involved in this, as they are in many of the projects that I work on. There is a grant that's a necessary piece to bring down the cost of the great expense. It's going to be somewhere around probably a total of $2.5 to $3 million capital investment when all this is over. So the Rural Center, North Carolina Rural Center, is participating with a grant, and I'd like to say thanks to Vanessa McClary and again the City of Rocky Mount for supporting this and doing the necessary work to get us to a grant approval that again brings down the cost of what is really an expensive project. When you take the Rose's, we'll say 40 jobs, Rose's, and combine that with the other retailers that I'm not at liberty to mention their names, we could be looking at 75 to 100 jobs that take place in that center. And it has been well over a decade since, again, we've had an anchor tenant there. So.
Okay. Now, what kind of redevelopment are we going to have to do to the shopping center before completion?
Mr. Creighton and his general contractor have already started the demolition piece inside the building. So if we were to stand in the parking lot, it probably would not be very visible. But inside the building, a lot of deterioration had taken place, particularly with the roof and et cetera. So they pretty much have got a good sound structure, the steel and the concrete walls, but everything is going to be totally redone inside the building. So it's going to be pretty much a brand new building inside.
Okay. And of course we do have the Rose's that is located off of Sunset Avenue. Is that still going to be in existence?
They went into an older Winn-Dixie building when Winn-Dixie left the state of North Carolina. Rose's went in there, and this is not a relocation of a business. It's not a lateral move. It's an additional Rose's into the area. So we welcome them. We're glad that that they're the ones that's really helping make this happen. Without Rose's signature on the lease, this deal probably could not have been put together, because they would be defined as the anchor tenant, and you got to have that.
Now, is there an expected date of completion for this project?
As I mentioned, they've already started with demolition. From what I'm hearing from the developer, he hopes to have this wrapped up by the early spring, rather, say around April.
Mm-hmm. And I know you mentioned earlier about development along Raleigh Boulevard, et cetera. We know we've had Bojangles to come there. We've got a new Family Dollar store that's being built as well.
Yes,
Any other things that we can expect along Raleigh Boulevard?
Well, as you may know, the Carter, Raleigh Street on one end and Raleigh Road on the other, and I sometimes get them mixed up for which one is on which side.
And now we call it East and West
Right.
Raleigh Boulevard.
And I will say, and I really didn't anticipate getting into this subject, but I will say that Lewis Watkins, as well as the city management, played a big role in us trying to focus commercially on the entire corridor, all the way from where it goes into 97, and it is 97, which I've learned from some history about the area, that it used to be a stagecoach road that came all the way from one side of the city to the other, and was the way to Raleigh, or a way to Raleigh at the time. So this whole Raleigh corridor as opposed to Raleigh Street and Raleigh Road. It's sort of a marketing idea and a way of putting some attention, some thought process on focusing on those areas. And pretty much on the west side of our city, along that corridor, there was a Walgreens